listening on the cloud. So instead of making the client call directly into your service, it will call the endpoint on the cloud, and the cloud will actually relay the call to your service. And it will do the same for the response. It will take the response and relay it to the client. Now the advantages are huge, right? You will have the service. You don't have to configure client connectivity with each and every partner that you want to deal with. So if you are doing, for example, trading partner management with 10 partners, you don't have to go and configure network connectivity, configure network with 10 clients. You just expose your endpoint on the cloud, and the cloud will actually relay your requests from the clients to your service. Now, let's see the implementation of this on our example. Okay. Now I have a service here called cloud service. Okay, first of all, let me again, everything has to go through the portal. And as you can see here, just like I had a node called hosted services and storage accounts, and one for databases, I have another one here for service bus, okay, where I have something called namespace. You create a namespace, and once you do, it can be used inside your service. So this is my service, and first of all, before showing you the configuration, let me show you the logic. The logic is simple. I have a service which actually goes and queries my online database and returns a list of users. Okay, so imagine that you have this service, you're providing this facility for your clients, like for example, to get the statistics about all the users accessing your system and connecting to my SQL Azure database. Okay, and I'm selecting all the users and I'm returning these users. So this is the simple logic of this service. As you can see, it's a WCF service. Okay, if you are familiar with WCF. And you have the system.service model here. Again, that's because it's WCF. But what's interesting here is the endpoint. Usually, if you have done WCF development before, you know endpoints of type, for example, basic HTTP binding, net TCP binding, WS HTTP binding. If you are doing REST, like in the previous session, you have web-based binding, RESTful-based bindings, all this stuff. Now, there's a special kind of binding here, which is called net TCP relay binding. Again, net means that clients have to be .NET clients. So this is the net TCP relay binding, and this is the address. Note that the address is listening to an endpoint on the cloud. So instead of, for example, using localhost, instead of using IIS and hosting your application or hosting your endpoint locally on IIS, you're making your service listen to this endpoint on the cloud. Okay? I mean, that's really amazing. So when you do that, let me run the service. So my service is starting now. Now I have this service running, which means that any client in any place can go and hit my service because it's listening to an endpoint on the cloud. So any client doesn't have actually to go now and configure connectivity to my environment. For example, this cloud client, which simply consumes the service. Okay, this is the code to consume the service using the channel factory. I'm not going to the details of the WCF code. Okay, but anyone who has done WCF development should be familiar with this code. I want to really focus on the app fabric stuff. So this client, as you can see, it defines the same endpoint. So it say, okay, I want to send message to this endpoint using the net TCP relay binding. Okay, and there's one thing that I didn't show you, that both the service and the client are sharing a key. So if you copy this key now, you can actually consume the service because my service is listening to connections on the internet. So if you can take, for example, I'm okay if you can take a screenshot of this configuration now. Okay, paste this configuration on your application and you'll be able to connect to my service, of course, as long as it's running. So let me start the service. Sorry, the client. I'm starting to lose focus here. Okay. Okay. So as you can see, my client connected to the service and it got the 2 users I have already in the database. Remember that in the database I have a user called MOHD and this user that I have just created. And as you can see, it got my 2 users. So going back to the scenario, this is the client and I had this endpoint. So this is the endpoint here. Okay. So I had this endpoint here and I had this client connected to this endpoint. The request relayed to the service get the response back through the relay to the client. Okay. By the way, for those of you listening, I mean, to this event in Riyadh, by the end of this month, we will have an offline event this time, and I will have a full session focused on the App Fabric. So I will have a 1 hour session focused on the details of Windows Server App Fabric. It's really an interesting topic. For me, it's the most interesting part of the Windows Azure platform. So I will have an offline session discussing this part in detail. I think the session will be on Thursday, 30th of June. Okay, in Prince Sultan University. Anyway, we'll announce this session later. So that's it. Let me check if I have anything else.